these big labels. I'm like, you're trying to find new talent and engage with people in regions, but it's like, if you don't have local regional representatives, how are you ever going to get a diversity of artists that you want? We don't assume that all men have the same perspective on issues, so why do we hire one token woman and then expect her to speak for all women?
Hi, I'm Hazel Savage, and this episode's guest is Grace Goodwin, who's a PhD researcher and a gender equality activist from Liverpool. In this episode, we'll be talking about Genie, a database of gender equality networks in Europe. We'll also be talking about the music industry, women, and politics. Thank you so much for joining me today on the SoundCloud podcast. So first of all, I know who you are, but for those at home listening in or watching, how do you introduce yourself? How do you like to describe yourself?
Oh, that's a nightmare question.
First question, absolute nightmare.
So I'm Grace Goodwin, and I'm a researcher and gender equality activist. I'd say they're my two roles. And I also do like artist mentoring, and I'm the founder of Genie, which is an online database of over 350 projects across Europe that support with gender equality in music. And I'm also a session drummer, which I always forget to add as well. I'm a musician.
I didn't even know about that.
Yes, that's my that was my starting job, and I still do it now as a session musician.
Oh, what kind of genres? What kind of music?
Because I was session, it was always sort of like, I was the performing monkey, but I was fine. I liked that role. I was never really a creative role in it. But mostly now I do like stuff with DJs, like house DJs, and I do percussion with a sax player, and I've got my own group for that. And that's like something I do. That's like my weekend job, and then I've got my more desk-based research.
So do you read music as well?
Not very well. That's the one thing I've always been ashamed of myself for. I was never very good at that. Like, if I hear something, I can play it
straight off.
But there's something about the reading. It just really, it sets me off. And I originally wanted to think about being like a pit drummer for musical theatre.
Yeah.
And then I realised I didn't have that skill. But it's good to realise sooner rather than later.
Well, I guess everyone's got. I don't read music at all. I play it. Well, I terrifyingly realised, because I've been playing guitar for since I was 13. So my very first guitar I've now owned for 28 years. So I've been playing for 28 years, which makes it sound like I should be amazing. But I also can't read music. And I also have, not embarrassment around it, but it's kind of a skill I wish I had.
Yeah, I definitely feel like, 'cause I've been playing, I think it's 20 years now I've been playing, and it's like, I think I always wanted to try and learn, but there was something, I don't know, there was always like that block for me that I never really got it. And it really annoyed me, because I'm a proper little swat. So it's like, I want to be good at things. And it really annoyed me that I could never, for some reason, it just doesn't translate for my brain.
Yeah, it just doesn't.
No.
But with you being able to play by ear and be able to play after hearing something, it's
quite a good skill to have.
That is a great skill to have. That is a really good skill to have. Well, I'm excited to that. And also, I know you said you didn't like the first scary question, but almost sounded like that was not the first time you'd said it. It was very sort of professional. Of the here's the bio.
I'm trying.
Yeah, loved it. And the Genie project stands for Gender Equity Networks in Europe.
Yes.
And how long have you been working on the Genie project?
Well, it was about a year, because I was part of a thing called the European Music Business Task Force, which is like a really long name. But it's basically, we were 12 people from across Europe who work in the music industry, and we met up at music festivals. I think our first meet-up was at Spot Festival in Denmark.
Yeah.
And then our final meet-up was at Talent Music Week. And over the year, we sort of met up and were like, okay, what are the problems we've identified in the music industry?
Yeah.
What do we want to do about it? And it was like a support network.
Oh.
So I think it was in Spot Festival, actually. I was speaking to someone who ran a gender equality project, because someone introduced me, was like, you'll have loads in common.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, do you know about this other project in Denmark, which is a producer course for women? And they were like, no, we don't know each other. And I was like, you're both based in Copenhagen and you're not aware of each other's work.
Yeah.
So then I went away and I was thinking about it, and I was like, to me, that's wild. And I was like, is that something that's going to be replicated across a lot of different countries and things? So I just started in the background collecting some stuff, thinking it was just for my own use.
Yeah.
And then it sort of escalated, where I was speaking to people, they were giving me more. And then I was like, oh God, this is quite a good resource. And I was like, oh, I'll just make it into like a little spreadsheet and give it to people. But then the people on the task force were like, no, this needs to be like a proper resource that people can use, and it's quite active and becomes more community focused.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love the idea. But what about the execution?
Thanks for the input, team.
Yeah. It's like, I absolutely love the idea, but I was like, where am I going to get the money to do this?
Yeah,
and then where am I going to, how do I even do this? I've never tried to create something like this before, so it felt like quite an overwhelming task.
So how formally was it related to your, because I know when I first met you, you were doing, or you're still doing, your PhD.
Yeah.
So is it also part of that? Did it become formalised, or is it separate?
No, it was sort of my project on the side.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's like, it feeds into some PhD work, and I'm definitely going to be, I'll talk about later, some research I'm thinking of using Genie for. But it was my research for my PhD is looking at regional gender inequality. So why where
in the
a woman,
UK?
yes, so why where a woman is based affects her career progression in the music industry. And I'm using Liverpool as the first case study because I know it so well, being from there and living there. So Genie was sort of separate to that, but for me it doesn't feel separate because it's all gender equality focused, and I found these things feed into each other,
of course,
in many respects. It doesn't feel like it's disparate when I'm working on all these different things and moving between them.
Well, I'm very excited about your PhD research as well, and as a second region, I would love to suggest to you the northeast of the UK, which is where I'm from. And it was when I was 21, I got HMV in Darlington to transfer me to London because I knew there were no jobs outside of retail in my hometown. And I don't know if it's changed that much, to be honest.
Yeah.
Still really difficult in the northeast.
Because I think Liverpool punches above its weight, I'd say, for a small space.
Yeah.
It really does, and there's a lot of opportunity. But I still feel that tension now of like, there's certain roles I think I would like to try in the industry, but I don't think are open to me. And because I refuse to move to London. It's not that I don't like London, but it's like I quite like my life in Liverpool. And I've got like these boring aspirations of buying property, having a house of my own. And it's like the quality of life is different for me.
100%.
And for me, that compromise is too big. And I've still managed to carve out a career path for myself, but it's like I've had to wiggle around everything to sort of make it work, rather than me joining a company and working my way through it.
And I reckon that's the status quo now, which is if you wiggle your way around it like you've done incredibly, I think you can carve out a niche. When I was starting fresh out of uni and I went to Newcastle at 21, it was London or nothing. And so I think that's maybe what's changed in the 10 years between us, I would say. But I'm also hopeful that it continues that trajectory.
Because even I'm only 28, but I think when I left, I was 21.
All right, so more than 10 years.
But I was like, when I left, I think there was still that thing of everyone seemed to camp off to London. And I noticed that because we all went to university in Liverpool, and I was one of the few people from Liverpool at the university studying music, which was really interesting. And it was my first opportunity to meet people from a lot of different countries and backgrounds. And there was still this general theme of, okay, we've all finished our degree 1 week later, right, we're all off to London. And then I was a bit like, oh God, is this something I should be considering? But I think I spent about 10 minutes of critical thinking and I went, I don't think that's for me. I don't think I want to do it.
Like you just said before, if you wanted to be a pit drummer.
Yeah, you'd have to. There's no way I could live in Liverpool and pursue that career to the level that I'd probably want to do it. Because it's like, I think there's still that sort of, like we talked about the glass ceiling for women, but I think there's still the glass ceiling of place. Which I think we don't talk about enough. Like, I thought after the pandemic there'd be more of an opportunity for people to have this sort of hybrid lifestyle, and you could work for a major label in London but still be in Liverpool and commute between the two and have that mixed lifestyle. But it still seems like it's not on offer. It still seems like companies are expecting people to move to places and work around them. And I think that's the thing about being self-employed as well, is I've always worked for myself and chose my routine. So the idea of then moulding myself to what a company wants, I struggle with that, but I understand why people do it.
Well, I think I was just going to say that I do agree. Like, I don't know, like I can't imagine a major label having a fully remote person in Liverpool, for example. However, at SoundCloud, we do have people that are fully remote. So, and then at first I was thinking, is it more of a tech music thing then? So not label side, but with SoundCloud, because we have amazing hybrid working. It's one of my favourite things. Good job, SoundCloud, to get that on camera. And but actually, I don't think it is a music tech thing, because I'm not going to name them, but if I think of some of the other big tech companies, I know that they don't have that policy, and some of them have gone back to 3 or 4 days a week in the office. So I don't think it's vertical dependent. I think it's probably each individual company, which again means you're doing that wiggling, you're doing that carving out, but it's not a guarantee. I think that still is one of the big problems, because I think my issue as well is with these big labels. I'm like, you're trying to find new talent and engage with people in regions, but it's like, if you don't have local regional representatives, how are you ever going to get a diversity of artists that you want? Because it's like, if you just send someone in and put them in Liverpool and go there, rather than working with someone in the local scene, maybe having them as a self-employed freelance or whatever, and they're supporting you with talent development and going, we're rooted in this scene, we know these people are good, you should take a look at them. They're people that you probably wouldn't have found being based in London. And I think
I'm confused why we can't really have that conversation.
Yeah.
But obviously you've got like EMI North open, and I'm really interested to see how that goes.
Same.
As it's sort of like an experiment at this stage to see opening a major and giving it a subsidiary outside of London.
Yeah.
Because I think Leeds is a great place for that.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to see how that model works.
I know, I was really excited when I first heard about EMI North as well, because I thought, oh, that is a step in the right direction. And I think, we still have to see it evolve and see how it works and the partnerships. But it was something that, as I say, and thank you for sharing that you're 28. So actually, I said I moved to London when I was 21, which means we're officially 20 years since I moved to London, not 10, 20. And there was just, especially in the northeast, as a region encompassing like County Durham, Darlington, Newcastle, South Shields Borough, all that sort of stuff, we are known as the most economically deprived sort of area in the UK. And we've never had that fortunate thing of the Liverpool scene with the Beatles, even the Manchester scene with Britpop. And so I genuinely felt it was London or nothing.
Yeah.
And I was probably right, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think even though the Liverpool does have that Beatles thing, it can be a help and a hindrance.
Got it.
Because I think it's still, when you see the type of artists that come out of Liverpool, it's not to even have a go at them. It's mostly white men who make a certain style of guitar music.
Okay.
And there's that issue with the diversity of what's coming out, because it's like, I'm seeing what's happening with the mentoring and the work I do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of very interesting young women coming through. But it seems to be they hit a stop, and it's like, okay, well, the men seem to get past that.
Yeah.
Certain men who are like in bands and stuff, and it's very much, it's not you making Beatles music, but it's easy to look at it and go, oh, it's white men in a band playing guitars.
Recognisable form.
Yeah, it's a recognisable form from the city.
Very successful.
Yeah, so I think that's another issue that what Liverpool has is it's sort of, its heritage is amazing, but it's sort of burdened by the expectation of it in a way.
Right. And
I have a big issue of Liverpool only focusing on the men who made the city.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of the music industry. And there's definitely women.
Yeah.
And I've just, for my own interest, been looking. I was like, God, there's women who've been proper change makers here. But yeah, I think for me, it's sort of the women behind the scenes as well. You've got the artists, but also there's women who ran clubs, bars, sort of created enterprises in Liverpool that then supported the ecosystems. But we don't really talk about any of them and what they did. But I think that's when you think of the music industry mogul, it's a man. It's like your Simon Cowells, your Lee Walshes. I'm using all the X Factor people, but they're the ones I'm thinking of. And then you have like the token woman, like you've got your Sharon Osbourne, who's like a business manager. Yeah. But it seems,
or your Mel B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's things like that, but it's the default is a man in many respects for these things.
I mean, I agree. I think even in research I've done from when I've built a business in this industry, the music industry massively skews male and the tech industry massively skews male. If you put those two together, it's even worse.
Yeah.
But I think, unfortunately, that is definitely one of the challenges that still exists in this industry. Is, even when you look at the gender split across a lot of the companies, or even if you look at the head of all the major labels currently.
Yeah. And
so,
I think the way because I'm not into tech, I'm not particularly tech savvy, but I think I have the viewpoint of tech of a normal person, of like, I look and it's very male, bro culture, hustle, grind culture, and all the AI stuff I see is incredibly cringe because it's not in many respects helping people. Yeah. And it's like, you're just taking away creativity from people. So that's sort of my general view. I know it's not a very nuanced one, but I'm seeing what the media has given me in many respects.
Well, and I can understand that view, because I do think there is a lot about tech culture that is so bro. Yeah. That is so Silicon Valley.
Yeah, very American as well.
You're very American bro, very like high risk appetite, like men who seem to have no concept of failure and have no fear of it at all, which as a founder, I don't really identify with that. So I think I absolutely see where you're coming from. And I do think there are some, but not all, AI companies where, because they don't come from a music background, or they don't have anyone music or anyone diverse on the team whatsoever, they don't think about how it impacts the artist. And I think the worst mistake a lot of those companies can make is they just they've found something technical that works, that does something really cool, but they haven't really thought about how it applies, what it would do, or how it would affect anyone. Yeah. And I think that's not even an AI specific problem. That's an ethics and bias within building tech.
Yeah, definitely.
So you're not wrong.
Yeah.
But and those are the companies that I look out for that I'm not interested in.
Definitely.
And I thought you were going to say the other thing, and again, I shall remain nameless, but I reviewed 3 music AI companies yesterday, and all three, didn't actually have the tech that they claim to have.
Yeah, I think that's quite a common thing. It's setting up a company, getting your money in, and then
crazily common.
Going, oh no, we failed, we can't make this work, and sort of getting out.
Yeah.
And I think I was reading some really interesting research about how the algorithm is actually biased, and the data it's used to build the algorithms can be in many ways misogynistic, homophobic, racist, because it's not taken into the viewpoints of anyone who isn't a man in many respects. Yeah. And that was really fascinating, some of the research about the biases of algorithms and AI.
It absolutely can. And I'll I know this isn't an AI specific chat, but obviously it's my area of interest.
Yeah.
But you make a really good point, and I brought this up in a talk just last week, which is you have to be so careful you don't teach an AI something that you didn't mean to teach it.
Yeah.
So, for example, say you're trying to teach an AI what rock music sounds like. Now, if I just sort of listed 10 rock bands now off the top of my head and grabbed 2,000 songs by the top 50 rock artists, probably over 95% of those would have a male vocal.
Yeah.
Right? Because, your Led Zeppelin, your Metallica, your Beatles, whoever, right? It's all male singers. Now, you don't have to be a man to sing rock. We all know that as humans. But the problem is if you show an AI 2,000 songs and 99% of them are male vocals, you could accidentally teach the AI that to be rock, it has to have a male vocal. Yeah. And then what you would get is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You ask the AI to start playlisting rock music and it's only serving up male vocalists. You ask the AI, well, which are the best tracks? It only serves up male vocalists. And then you get to that point where you're propagating the careers of more male musicians because you didn't really think all the way back to the unintended consequence of the training.
Yeah.
The best companies know this, and smart companies who have a mixture of women and men and different nationalities, they know that you have to do this from day one. But for those who aren't even thinking about it, and it does concern me as well when I see, startups of 10 people where it's all the same profile of person, who's even asking that question?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's the big thing of, I think, any equality and diversity issue. It's like, do you have the person in the room asking the question, or are you all just patting each other on the back and going, great work, we've hired one woman, we've thought we've done well here. I think that's a common thing that quite happens, is sort of like, okay, well, we've got our diversity high, we've got our woman perspective in the room, and it's like, but we don't assume that all men have the same perspective on issues, so why do we hire one token woman and then expect her to speak for all women? Yeah. In many respects, I think that's a common problem. And
I think the other thing with that, and this came up, I was at a conference in Belgium, California, and there was quite a few of the female executives there, and it turned out we'd all had the same experience of being the one woman.
Yeah.
Right? And the general takeaway, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but certainly my takeaway was, say it is 10 men and you're the one woman, not every woman then feels empowered to be able to say, it's not really a safe space to be able to say what you actually think.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of pressure to align and be more like the other 10 people in the room.
Yeah.
And there are also can be a lot of behaviours that are unfavourable because they don't realise they've built a culture around 10 men initially, and you just kind of bolt on one female hire, and it doesn't feel inclusive and it doesn't feel welcoming. The best companies can turn it around. They're open to it. They'll work with you, and the loudest voices and the squeaky wheels will try and make it work anyway. But it's not enough to just go, well, we hired one woman.
Yeah. If you don't then have any infrastructure to support them, and then not make that the one woman that you ever hire, because you felt like you needed to. Yeah. Because I think this is one thing I always talk about is I don't think most men are malicious or misogynistic. No. I think most men have incredibly good intentions, but they don't, and sometimes think about their relationship to women in the workplace and how the sort of the networks they work in perpetuate things. And I think that's a general common problem. And it's like, well, I understand from a male perspective, if you are in a network that benefits you, why would you try to change it? Because it benefits you. So it's then having the outside question, because there's something I'm now considering with my work and my research. I've stopped asking women the problems, because I don't need to ask another woman about the issues about the music industry.
Yeah.
I've started to speak to men and ask them their perspective on how they operate in the industry, and how do you hire? Who would you go to first? If you wanted to hire someone for a job, have you ever considered that this sort of behaviour might make a woman feel deeply uncomfortable, or might make her feel like she's the token hire? And I think it's reframing the perspective now of like, okay, well, I think women have done enough groundwork to say, we hate all these things, we've had all these problems. And it's now just speaking to men, and not even in like a nasty way, or being like picking at them, and just going, well, have you considered these questions from your perspective?
Genuine questions.
Yeah.
You know, where are you going for your hires? Because, you know, like you say, you've spoken to enough women. I bet I could name you 3 great resources off the top of my head to find great female tech candidates.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really matter if they're not known about or found about by the men that we need to be doing the hiring. Because
men hold the majority of money and power. So they're the ones that, in many respects, need to be the ones to change things. Because women are there doing the hard graft, most of them anyway.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, it's like never the twain shall meet. It's like you've got the women doing the equality stuff, and you've got the men running the businesses. Right. And it's like the never the twain shall meet.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? Like, even all the research, like all the research I know of and work on around women, music, gender, it's all written by women. No, I know of one male researcher who was sort of engaged with that type of work.
Interesting.
And I'm like, that's fascinating that it's always women feeling the need to go in and write books, papers on these things.
But also an opportunity.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, really interesting. I'm excited about that. So I did skip over this question initially, not intentionally, but I was too excited to find out more about you as a drummer. But I wanted to tell everyone how we met.
Yes.
Or you tell it how we met.
Yeah, because it feels like a fairy tale story, because when I tell people, they're like, this doesn't happen.
No, I know, but sometimes it does.
So I was like, I got invited to the Youth Music Awards. I'd never been. It was lovely. It was the Troxy in London, I think. And it was very chill. And then we got some lovely mutual friends at the record label and community and company come play with me. And they were like, oh, you should meet Hazel. And it was like the end of the night. I was tired. I was ready to go home to my bed. We'd sat through the awards ceremony in the 3 courses. And then I was like, oh, hello. And you never even said who you, like, what your job, you just said your name. And I was like, oh, I'm Grace. And you were asking about like my work and everything. And I don't even know why I told you. It was weird.
Maybe it was because it was the end of the night and you were a little tired, because you went, I'm having a real hassle with funding.
Yeah. And I was like, because it's like, a few friends have been like, oh, you should get funding for this. And I was like, I didn't come from a world where it's just like I can ask people for money to make something. It's like that world is so removed from everything I know of like asking for investment in a company. It's like, I don't understand that world. It's like, it feels so far removed from everything I know.
It's like I say to people, when people say, you know, when they've started a startup company and they go, oh, we did a friends and family round of about 200 grand to get us started. And I'm like, who are your friends and family?
I know. It's like, I'd like to meet them. I'll marry into the family if they're going to give me the money.
Fair, someone said to me, well, you know, friends and family is the nickname for it. It can be angel or informal investors. And I said, but the idea is people in your network that you can somehow get 200 grand out of and that not be a big deal. In my life and my circles, you know, especially growing up, that was absolutely not.
Yeah, I'd be going around with like for a tenner. Like, can everyone give me a tenner,
and I'd
please?
have to do a car wash or something, and you know.
Yeah, do like sort of like a charity drive for
exactly.
it. But yeah, so and then I met you and we were talking about my work, and I was like, oh, I'm thinking about doing this thing, I've got this idea, and I was like, I want to make a website, and I'd even costed everything up.
Yeah.
In my like, I spoke to people, found the web designer I wanted and everything, because I was just like, okay, well, if I know my number, I can then work back. At least I know what I need for this.
Yeah.
Even though I was like, I've got no chance in hell of finding someone to give me money. And then I told you, and you were like, oh, how much are you looking for? And I was like, oh, well, this much. And you were like, oh, I'd like to give you it. Yeah. And I was like, I thought you were messing, to be honest. I was a bit like, are you sure? And like the money you gave me, it's like you were saying, this is nothing compared to what companies want for like startups and stuff, and the amount of money raised. It's mine was just covering my costs to make this website.
I thought you were going to come to me with like a tech startup budget, being like, well, we're going to need $1 million to kick off. Unfortunately,
I should have, shouldn't I?
You should have. You might have got nearer. But more importantly, I think because we were introduced via Tony from Come Play With Me, you've got the mutual connection there in the network, and also. I also knew from working at SoundCloud that these were exactly the types of initiatives we were almost on the lookout for. So when you were talking about the Genie project, it's almost like I was almost like fate. I was placed there at the right time, because I've got my experience personally from being an investor. And so talking about funding is one of my number one favourite things to do. So I'm also never put off by it. And then secondly, I had my SoundCloud hat on, because I was thinking, this sounds like something we'd love to get involved with. So it absolutely just worked. Just absolutely perfect timing. Can't even
and it's like serendipity.
it.
It's like, I don't think I'll ever have a moment as perfect as that again. It's like, when are you ever going to ask people for money and be like, there's no benefit for you financially in this, you're going to give me the money and you'll not see that investment back because it's not a product that's going to make you money. It's like, I understand when people invest in companies to make money, but it's like, I'm making this website which is going to be a resource for people to use. And it's like, there's no profit-driven arm of this.
But I think that's the difference between, say, like a commercial investment where you expect there to be money made, and then something which just, I think, to quote Elia, our CEO, is just the right thing to do. Which I think is how he phrased it to me, with some of the initiatives that I've gotten us involved with here in the UK as well, including like the Black Founders Programme with Sony and Digital Catapult. Like, there are some things that just, as a company, if you have the ability to help and to invest in the community. I don't mean invest in we give you this much, so we want this much back. I mean, invest because this makes our industry better, makes the world a better place. And this is probably part of the reason why a lot of us got into this industry. To help with these types of projects.
Because I think for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to put all this information in one place, all these projects, so that people can just find each other and make a bit more connection and community around it. And I was like, that was my main aim with it. And it was like quite a spotty aim. It was like, I've got this idea, I want to do it, with no idea of how it would work out. But I think I was putting the feelers out, and people were like, this information is useful. And it's like, I love research and I love a bit of data. And I was like, okay, well, if it's useful for me, it's probably going to be useful for someone else. And I think it's definitely proven its worth since it's been launched. So I think the
website looks absolutely
it's so
phenomenal.
Pretty, isn't it?
It's one of the best websites I've ever seen. We'll put the links in the
I've
chat.
got to give a big shout out to Yoke Studio, who are a Liverpool-based studio. There's just two of them, and they're the loveliest people ever.
Brilliant.
And they were so amazing to work with. They did all the branding on the website for me and answered all my silly questions of me being like, how do I make a website domain? I don't understand any of these things. I'm such a Luddite. I was just like, I need help with all of this. And they were a dream to work with.
It looks absolutely fantastic. You should, I'm sure you are super proud of it. So, and how many companies are in the database or up there at the minute? What number are you at?
Well, since, I had quite a few last week, because we had like obviously a launch party in Berlin for it.
Lovely.
And I had a lot of submissions and a lot of people coming up and being like, oh, have you got us? And I think I'm up to 385. So I'm getting very, very close to 400. And we launched with 300. So it's like the numbers keep going up, which is great.
It's going up faster now that it's live as well,
isn't it? Because it's built on community. It's so much easier, because when it was behind the scenes, it was me sitting there Google translating, hoping the algorithm would start suggesting things to me if I kept following more accounts that were doing the type of work I was interested in for the database. So it was a lot of slog behind the scenes, and a lot of like setting up meetings with people who were based in certain countries and going, okay, you work on this, who else do you know? Because I always still say, I am not the expert about how to run a project in Germany for women who are producers. It's like, that's not my role in this. It's like the people on the ground know how to do that, and they understand their own ecosystem better than I ever could. But mine's just sort of getting all that surface level information for it all to be in one place.
So people can go to the website, all the projects are there that are searchable. And have any of the projects really surprised you, or anything been submitted that you just had no concept existed, or something that surprised you in a good way?
I think for me, the thing that people always point out is my inclusion of collectives, like DJ collectives, because I think they've never really been considered gender equality projects. But if anything, I think they're some of the most forward-thinking people when it comes to gender identity. And there's a lot of crossover with LGBTQ causes, refugee charity. There's a lot of like different things that they
and might some of these collectives
in.
Be like mixed gender within the group?
That's and I've included them because I'm like, there's women in it, there's the trans community, there's queer communities, and I'm like, but all of these things are helping the general consensus of supporting women, gender minorities, whatever. So I've included them, and I think I'd never really engaged with collectives or that sort of community because I'm not like a clubber. I'm not really into club culture in that way.
Yeah.
So it was a very, very new discovery for me, and to see how much interesting work they do on the ground,
Yeah.
and how cool they all are. They're all so cool.
I know.
And it's like, I want to be a cool DJ now. It's like I'm determined to just go to like one of the DJ workshops when one comes up near me.
Yeah.
And because they're just so cool.
Oh, I love that.
And like the main thing with the website is I didn't want to use like logos. So it's all pictures of people from the projects doing
Right.
things and being active.
Yeah.
And like you're seeing them actually physically in the space doing things.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than like a post photo of everyone looking polite.
That feels like you can really identify with it. Like,
yeah, I think you can get the vibe from it instantly from the pictures I've used.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I know what this is and how it operates and the type of community it's creating.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Now, has there been any sort of backlash to the project?
Oh, I had a few fun comments, but I live for it because it's just, I'm like, you're sitting on the internet replying to this.
Okay,
Do you know what I mean? It's, I don't care. I
Yeah.
honestly don't, because it's like, if anything, you just prove that the work is needed more than ever.
Yeah.
Because I had quite a few like, don't women already have enough equality? And I'm like, that's not my place to educate you. That's your place to be ignorant.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, I'm busy doing the actual work.
Yeah.
So I got called a narcissistic mouth breather, which I thought was quite an interesting one. I was
That's
like,
creative.
I thought it was quite creative. I
Yeah.
even screenshot and I was like, I like that one. I was like,
Yeah.
I'll give them the due on that.
Yeah,
And I was like, okay, I'll take it as a narcissistic project if you want, but
Yeah,
to
I
be
think
honest,
it was,
overall, it's been fine.
It's given me vibes of the comments recently in US politics about if you haven't got children by a certain age, you're a crazy cat lady.
Yeah.
And I was like, I am a crazy cat lady.
I suppose I am. I do have 2 cats.
I've only
we're
got
fully
one,
committed.
but I'm straight up there with the crazy cat ladiness. So,
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I was saying to someone last week, we were just chatting about it, and I was like, oh, I'm surprised it's been quite tame. I haven't had anything too nasty yet. And I was like, it's a bit depressing that I had to sort of be relieved that I haven't had abuse for launching something like this. Because I was even thinking about like my politics and how I define them now. The things I believe are considered more radical. And I've never considered myself a radical person. I'm quite like a bit basic and a bit boring when it comes to what I believe. But I think like trans community, trans rights, all of that is now seen as a radical issue in a way that it never was.
Well, is this potentially because Europe has been skewing slightly more right?
Definitely. So I'm moving further and further to left. Like I've always been involved with leftist causes and supported them, but it feels like the Overton window, it keeps moving and moving.
Right.
And what things I considered quite like neutral are now considered radical.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. And I think this is my form of activism in a way. It's like giving people information and resources and disseminating information.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I can contribute to sort of the movement in a way. And I think the inclusion of trans communities and trans women and the projects that support trans people.
Yeah.
Because if someone turned around and said to me, well, that I don't want that included, I'd be like, well, it's not your project, it's mine.
Yeah.
I run it.
Yeah.
Even though it's for community and focus, I'd be like, well, it's mine at the end of the day.
But also,
So
I feel like perhaps 10 years ago, trans rights wasn't.
No, because remember Nadia won Big Brother and she was trans. Do you remember her?
Oh,
And no one ever made any deal of it. No one was bothered that she was trans. It wasn't like a headline thing. It was she won Big Brother.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've moved so far. It's like we need a new issue to find, because it's like, for me, it upsets me because it's like, obviously I wasn't alive during like the AIDS crisis and stuff, but that sort of the vitriol that was skewered towards that community, I think is now being put towards this community.
Right.
And I think you can see that pathway, that line from one to the other, the connection. And that's more upsetting the women who purport to be feminists, whether we believe they are or not, perpetuating this discrimination because they feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think you're right. And it's interesting as well that we've seen, you know, in some cases successfully and some not, but we've seen the rise of like right-wing parties in both the UK, France, Germany. And I feel like you said, that slight skew to the right means that what were sort of left or even left centre politics now seem further to the left.
Yeah, more radical than they
exactly,
ever were.
yeah. So it seems more radical. And I've always thought it was fascinating as well, which is if you look at the two US parties, you know, if you were to overlay them onto a sort of a UK politics, they're both right of the centre.
It's fascinating,
but
isn't it?
You know, they over there think they've got one left, one right, and we're like, probably both a little bit on the right, to be honest. So, you know, how it sort of impacts globally as well, I find fascinating.
But yeah, like I said, it is depressing that I have to be like, oh, I'm really glad I haven't had too much abuse. But I think I'm incredibly lucky in the respect that I just see that stuff and go, okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me, but I've never had like a pure internet pile-on.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how horrific that is, but
Yeah.
I've always just been in the background squiddling away on my spreadsheets and my work.
I think it's one of the best and worst things about online culture these days, which is, you know, there are so many amazing things that have come out of it, but there's also, it's opened that Pandora's box as well. So, but I'm glad it's been mostly positive.
It's been very lovely, but I think the thing that I still struggle with is it's all like women and marginalised genders who are engaging with it, following it, and I'm like, I want more men to get involved with this and
definitely.
sort of follow it. And even like the followers, if you look at the skew of it, it's like it's mostly all women.
Yeah.
And I'm like, these people are running the projects, they get it. It's like, but we need more men to join in and see what's going on in these communities. But I think there's also that issue of like men feeling uncomfortable in women's spaces and not, I think in many ways, not wanting to sort of disturb the sanctity of it and not involve themselves because they're like, well, that's a space for women.
Yeah.
So they don't want to get involved. So it's that sort of awkwardness.
Yeah.
And I think there's some thing that upsets me is when men do try and get involved, women are like, this is not your issue. And I'm like, but we need to bring them in. But it's like the balance is so hard to find. And I think obviously we've had God knows how many years of gender politics and feminist waves. It's like we're not anywhere near where we need to be, but in many ways we're better, but there's still a bit of a movement backwards as well.
I see what you mean. You know, it's sort of like, some men are probably going to be slightly worried about coming into the space thinking, well, am I intruding? Am I going to be seen to be taking over?
Yeah.
You know, maybe a lot of men aren't, even good men, are not totally comfortable on how to be an ally in the best way. And, you know, even, you know, say you sent out an invite to, you know, everyone at a tech company to attend an event, using tech as an example. Because of the skew of that company, you would end up with the majority men at then a gender equality event, which kind of looks and maybe feels a bit weird. So I can understand why, but I think this is the work, isn't it? This is the next phase.
Yeah, and I think because I do a lot of gender equality events, it's always women attending them.
Yeah.
And then like one or two men. And like I say, at the end of the day, it's like, the women in the room don't need to hear this. There's not one thing you say that's shocking to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the interesting thing about like the idea of the female space. A man entering it, is there ever another situation where a man will be the minority in a room? I don't think there are many spaces where that will happen. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's quite rare for a man to walk into a space and him to be the only man. Whereas for a woman, it's very normal. For my career as the token female drummer, it's been very, very normal for me to walk into a room, be the only woman in a studio space or things like that. And I think it's interesting. I've now moved the other way where I gravitate to working mostly with women. Yeah. So I'm perpetuating that thing of keeping us separate as well.
I can give you one very clear example of where in a whole room full of women, there'll be one or two men. Zumba classes. I go to a lot of Zumba classes, and you always get token one or two men who just absolutely
flipping. Or a bit of hot yoga as well.
Love it.
I've had that in hot yoga. You got your one or two token men.
Yeah, who are loving it.
Yeah.
They're loving it. So more onto that then. If people are, and it's great to hear that you're engaging with allies and with other companies. If people want to get listed on the Genie database or even just find more out about it, how can companies or collectives sort of get in touch or projects?
So it's dead easy. If you go on the website, which is www.geniedatabase.com, you can add your own project. You just scroll down on the homepage and there's a section where you just fill in a form. It literally takes you 5 minutes.
Brilliant.
And then it just comes to me, I check it over and I get it added. It's literally, it doesn't take any time.
Nice.
And it's just an easy way for you to get your project added. And the good thing about the database is I think it's quite intuitive from the people I've spoken to. You can search it by country or project type. So say you're someone who's like, I want to get involved in something. You might be like, okay, I want to be in a collective. I want to be a DJ. There's tags for that. And you can search through the system like that. So it's not like you're having to look through all 400 projects and work out, oh God, and you're overwhelmed by it. You can sort of get down to the niche of what you want to get involved in.
You can filter.
Yeah, because I spent ages trying to come up with like a filtering system that made sense. Yeah. Because it took forever, because it's like I had all these projects and I was like, okay, well, I can see patterns emerging with what you do. Yeah. But how do I create a system that's easy for everyone else? Because for me, it's all in there now.
Yeah, of course.
It's like, it's never leaving at this stage. It's been a year's worth of work. Yeah. But for most people, I can imagine it would be overwhelming to go on and be like, here's 400 projects to get involved with. Yeah. And you're like, oh God.
Start to scroll through alphabetical
it's like
order.
No one has the time to be doing that. So it's like I've tried to make it as intuitive as possible to sort of engage. And then we have an Instagram page. I've just kept it to one social because it's like I don't have the time to be updating 75 different social pages.
Perfect.
So Instagram just feels like the nicest medium because most of the projects are on there. Yeah. And it's just a nice way to engage with people as well.
Yeah. Perfect. No, I love that. And always one of my recommendations for social is there's no point signing up to 12 platforms if you're not going to engage on 12 platforms.
Yes, I don't have the time. It's like, I thought about it and I was just like, realistically, can I make this work? And I was like, no. So you might as well just focus on where you can actually put your effort in.
Pick what works.
Yeah, and where it works. And people can message me on there. People can send me stuff, ask me to do things with them.
Yeah.
It's like these platforms make sense, having a website and an Instagram, and that's it.
And it's a nice casual format as well, like with the video reels you've done and stuff. It's like, it just feels quite sort of like, oh, Grace is chatting away to us.
Yeah, because it's like, I'm really bad at, like, I'm not a content creator. I'm so bad. I have no taste when it comes to things like that. I feel like I'm well beyond my age when it comes to things like socials. I'm like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's the area that feels very alien to me as well.
Right.
So it's like, it's harder for me to engage with that because I don't really know the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And I've had to get a bit of help and be like, am I acting like a proper boomer here? I don't know what I'm doing on Instagram sort of thing. But
I've been loving it so far.
I was like, well, it all looks pretty. And that's the main compliment. Everyone's like, oh, it looks so pretty. And I'm like, that's all that matters to me.
That's that amazing branding and
that
amazing
all I care about is the aesthetic.
Again.
It's beautiful.
We love that. So with there being almost nearly 400 projects now, are you seeing, obviously you'll see a bit of the data behind it. Are certain countries more involved?
Yes.
Are you seeing, like, where's the focus?
Well, I think that's the thing that's most fascinating is the sort of the idea that the database shows you the gaps. It shows you the weaknesses.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, why don't I have any projects for this place?
Yeah.
And it's like, is it because I didn't bother or because there's a conversation to be had? And it's like there a cultural difference there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most fascinating thing for me that I want to spend the next probably year working on is reaching out to people in these countries where I don't have projects, because there's some countries where I've reached out and I've really struggled and they've been like, there's not really anything.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't know of one thing that's trying to support women in music, and it's like, oh, well, it's not really the culture here, or we don't really have that. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And for me, and I think weirdly enough, Germany has the most projects.
Okay,
but I think it's because of club culture and collectives, and there's so much on the ground in that respect compared to other countries. And there's a lot of like producer workshops. And I think obviously when you think of sort of like the scene on the ground in places like Berlin, it makes sense.
Absolutely.
Why there's so much. But then there's other places where you're struggling to find things as well.
And I wonder if hopefully it's just a case of almost like catching a thread of something, you know, meeting the right person within a community.
That's all it takes.
Because I remember when I first moved to Singapore, I really struggled to like find like, where is the music scene?
Yeah.
How do I know if like Metallica are coming to town and touring, but how do I know? Like, there must be bands that are from here, that live here. A, where do they play? And B, how do I find out that they're playing?
Yeah.
And then eventually I was working in a job where my graphic designer was a guitarist in like a math rock band. And as soon as I had that in with Freddie, it was like, who's Freddie playing with? Who are his other friends? Where are they playing? What show is this?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're in and this whole world opens up and it's right there. So I'm hoping that maybe it'll be, not in all of the cases, but in some of the cases, just getting that like initial
find
intro.
that one person. Like I said, it's like, I'm not the expert. I want people who are rooted in the scene to tell me what's going on. So I can put it in this place for them to share.
Lovely. I love that. Absolutely love that. So in terms of the future of Genie, in terms of the expansion, obviously great to hear that there's still some areas of Europe to investigate and to look at. But what are the even bigger plans? What's next?
I think for Genie as it is now, a yearly audit of like what is going through every project we've got on there. Is it still operational? And what have we lost? Because that's a very common theme. The turnover's high because a lot of these projects rely on like piecemeal funding or they ran out of people's own pockets. Yeah. And it's a lot of energy to run this type of thing. And I think there's that general consensus of things stopping because people don't have the time or the money to do it.
Well, situations change as well.
So I think reaching out to those people and trying to understand, why did you stop running this, or why did you put it on a hiatus, and coming out with a yearly plan and go, okay, we've lost this many projects. Because even the year I was developing it in research, I think I lost 20.
Right, okay.
It's like, oh, okay, that's not active anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I want to start keeping a record of that because I think that's important. So that's a big plan for Genie as it is.
And I love that. Because I also wonder if you know, if and when you get that info, you could archive those projects.
That's what I was thinking, an archive.
Because it'd be great if they could still be searchable as like a historical reference. But also as well, you're right in that if you don't want the database to end up where at some point it's 50% or more inactive projects and there's no way to filter that out.
Yeah.
Because then it's going to be harder to use and less useful. So I think that's really important work.
I think I'm still thinking about that usability because it's not even like 6 months old at this point, but these are just things I'm thinking of. And I think I've realised that no one's advocating on behalf of all these people who run projects. So I want to do a bit of a research project, speaking to them, doing a survey, sort of understanding, why did you set up this project?
Yeah.
What is the best practice? What are you struggling with? What are the issues? How are you funded? Which I think is the biggest problem. And what are the issues stopping you developing this further? And are you collaborating across borders with other people in your city, country? And sort of getting the lay of the land from that perspective, from a research perspective.
And then also, if and when, say, a collective does disband, it might be sort of interpersonal relationships. It could be lack of funding. And I think that will be really interesting to capture.
Yeah.
To think about what drives these projects forward and what stops them.
Yeah. And I think if I can make a case for that, I can then sort of maybe set out some recommendations and go, well, maybe some of the biggest music companies should be considering investing more heavily in these projects, but letting them do their own thing, but investing in them. Because it's like, if there's these producer courses, that benefits you if some amazing producers come out of it.
Yeah.
So why would you not try and invest in it
Yeah.
and support it? And you can say that you were there first.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? So I was like, if I can get that data, because companies love data.
Yep.
And I was like, if I can collect it back to them and go, well, here's what comes out of this, then I can sort of justify it and maybe try and support them a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think another bigger goal is like a Genie US. But I was like, we were discussing, it can't be called Genie Us, like Genie US. I was like, I'm sure that's copyrighted. They can't use it.
Well, maybe
it feels too good.
Yeah, Genie USA. And then it's slightly less.
Maybe I can get away with
a
it.
tongue twister.
Because I was thinking, I think America is its own beast, quite frankly.
Right.
And I think it would need its own separate database. And I think I'm obviously not rooted in the US scene, but I've been collecting tentative stuff and I'm like, God, there's a lot going on. But it's very disparate once again. It's like, okay, well, obviously in New York and LA, you've got loads of things. It's like, what's happening in Texas? What's happening in all these other states?
Yeah.
And I think it's a fascinating project from that perspective, is bringing in the sort of the US slant of it, because even the research I read about gender equality US and music, it's not as extensive as the UK. There's something about the UK that people really commit to it, like with the research.
I've got a few threads for you to pull on. As soon as you started saying that, my little brain started thinking. I've got quite a few feminist activist friends that live in New York and Austin, because I used to volunteer at a guitar camp for girls.
Amazing.
So I used to teach guitar to girls 8 to 18 in New York.
That would instantly be on Genie US.
From underprivileged backgrounds, so sliding scale of contributions.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah.
Willie May Rock Camp for girls.
Okay, I'll look that up.
You need to meet the team there.
Yeah,
100%.
that sounds amazing.
And then I met all the other teachers through that programme, female or female identifying, and there's just a huge network. So I think once you sort of start to peel the corner of that label,
it's sort of, you knock one domino and it sort of follows. And it's like been like that with Genie, like other people recommending it and talking about it, and then it's like, oh, okay, and people understand it.
Yeah.
So I think with the US, I'd like to do that, but I think my next big thing is another funding round of being like, okay, I want more money off someone to basically fund my time and my effort, because this is another thing, is being like, well, the time I'm putting into these things, it's a lot. Yeah. It's like, should I be doing this for free? Is it a feminist action to do this work for free?
And free labour, because it sounds like, it is worthwhile work, but it also sounds like it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and it's sort of like I'm having to do it little and often around the other things I'm doing as well.
Yeah. So going back onto that as well, because I think it's helpful to talk about the funding. What are your biggest challenges, and what do you think the next steps are for that?
So I think it's obviously the serendipity of meeting someone and being like, would you like to give me money? And them saying, yeah. It's like, it's probably not going to be that easy. So it's the idea of finding a company that aligns with what I believe, but I don't feel like I'm selling out, and I don't feel like I'm aligning myself with something that makes me go, ooh.
Yeah.
Because when you think of the type of work I'm doing, I can't align myself with certain things because that would make sense for me, ethically or morally, and with the project. So, and it's sort of knowing what to ask for, knowing your price. Yeah. It's like, what is my time worth for this? Yeah. So I think they're all things that it feels very new to me, and I don't know if it's being a woman as well, it feels weird asking for money.
Well, I think it's a bit of a British thing, to be honest.
It's a British thing. It's probably British, like working class sort of. Yeah. I'm not from a financial background. I'm not like a girl boss CEO. Do you know what I mean? I'm not Sheryl Sandberg leaning. Yeah. I don't know how to do any of that.
I fortunately, because I lived in Asia for 6 years, you really quickly get over any embarrassment around talking about money, because that's the culture there, to be like, how much do you earn? how much you pay for your house? What's that cost
That'd
you?
be so much easier if everyone in Britain was like
I
that.
know, and everyone's just like, you know. And I remember the first time I was in a taxi with a friend, and the taxi driver asked me how much rent I was paying, and my British friend just went, like, looked at me like, how dare they? And I was like, that's not rude here.
Yeah.
Like, that's totally fine.
That's
Don't worry
that's so
about it.
interesting. We definitely need to implement that because I'm very much like that with all the musicians. I work with the young musicians.
Yeah.
I'll tell them exactly what I earn for every gig,
Yeah.
what my starting rate was, now what I now earn, how long I'll play for. Because I'm like, well, if you know that, then you understand the market.
Because
essentially.
the being embarrassed to talk about it holds us back.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's like I'm more than happy to go to a big company and ask them for money. It's just finding the right way to do it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I know you have money. Do you get what I mean? It's not like I'm asking my
will-
family to give me the rounds of
I
money.
will help you put your pitch deck together, Grace.
Yes, that would be good. I mean, I've already got a draft of it, so that would be great.
I would love to take a look at the initial draft of the pitch deck.
That's the big goal, is money to then fund the things I want to do, because
Brilliant.
I think it's like, it's got to be a feminist action, but my time isn't there for free for everything I do.
Yeah.
And committing to that.
So as a small follow-up on that, have you had any success, or what do you think about like UK government funded initiatives?
So
Because there's stuff like Creative UK, Innovate UK,
Yeah.
Digital Catapult, like all these types of initiatives.
I think I looked at a lot of that and it all just feels so overwhelming and a bit like, oh God. And it's like, do I have to be a limited company? Do I have to be in profit? There's so many different things, even like Arts Council funding. It's like, the irony is I support loads of people with funding applications, musicians.
Oh, right.
I know how to do all these funding applications, but for some reason, Genie falls between all of these niches of what it is. And it's like, it's not delivering if I was delivering a producer course for women, I'd probably this funding I could get. But if I'm just like, it's a website that we'll like hold hands and talk about and we go on and find other people, it falls in between all these gaps. And ironically, a lot of my friends in Europe are like, oh, Creative Europe funding, would love this. And like, there's so much European funding. Then because of Brexit, I'm not eligible for any of it. So it seems like Europe is a lot better place for that type of work.
Yeah, you're going to have to work on the Irish passport now.
I know. I'm going to have to find some Irish connections somewhere. But yeah, there's that weird, it falls in between the gaps because it's not delivering a project for people, but it is a resource for people.
Yeah.
So that's the weird thing.
Yeah.
But the good thing is it's relatively like, what I was say? It's like, it doesn't cost me much to run it.
Yeah.
It's like I'm just paying for the domain and stuff. So it sort of ticks along by itself.
Yeah.
But it's like the building it and going out and doing things, and like I want to go to festivals, conferences.
Yeah.
And get paid for my time to talk about it.
Especially if you're going to dedicate your time to it, and then the other plans you have to expand it within Europe and potentially the US. That's a whole nother project. I feel like that could be that's an innovative project that builds on top of what you've already got done. And definitely shouldn't work for free on that one.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Perfect. Well, honestly, I could keep going.
I know,
I'm
such a yapper. I'm like, I want to talk more.
We'll do another hour, keep going. But we do have to wrap up. But I've absolutely loved chatting today. Super fascinating, and I love the Genie project. We'll make sure we share all the links there in the bio.
And thank you for helping me. It wouldn't have been possible without you. So
that's what we're here for. Getting it together.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Grace.
Thank you.